You are listening to the Famous at Home podcast with Dr. Josh and Christi Straub.
Because when it's all said and done, we all want to know that we were famous at home. Welcome back to the Famous at Home podcast. We are excited that we've got a little bit more of a studio set up here.
We're working on it.
We're trying to get things set up here for the YouTube channel. So for those of you who have tuned into YouTube, we're so grateful that you are now watching on your televisions and wherever else that you're watching. I've heard people watching on their televisions, which I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And here we are coming to you and from our home, and it's been the first
pretty
one.
Fun.
We rearranged our entire office, so just so you can kind of get a feel for this. And for those of you listening on the podcast, your audio people, just bear with us a second. By the way, if you are audio people, at least do us a favor, go subscribe on the YouTube channel, because then you can see us every now and again. If you're like, ooh, they're getting into a little bit of a tiff right there in the podcast, you can actually go watch our facial expressions.
I would like to watch that.
I'd like to see their facial expressions.
Watch that?
I don't know, but
I guess people who watch reality TV. That really is the reality of reality TV.
So we have revamped our entire office here. The videos that you would have seen the last couple of episodes with the books on the shelf behind us are actually behind you now. They're on the other side of the room, and we switched to being over here. And
I like it like this.
We have a space now.
It feels feels like homey, but also like casual. But now we can just sit down and talk.
We also have room in our office now. I can't stand clutter. And so
you watched or listened
desk was right in the middle of the room, and that's no longer there. Now it's lights.
It's no longer, because Joshua Becker, if we'll talk about that episode again,
go check out the Joshua Becker episode.
Minimalism, that was a good one. But really, we just went through even all our books. I'm looking at our bookshelf over here. I mean, we went through and got rid of so many books. And we were just keeping them to keep them. You think maybe you'll read it again one day, but really think about how many times we've moved and we just take carts of books.
Well, and the nice thing about our home now is that we, since the Joshua Becker episode, if you haven't listened to it, the simplicity.
Why do we keep talking about it? Because I think it was so
changed
significant
our lives.
to us.
It has. Yeah. Our house is now at a place. We're getting to a place where you can take a deep breath when you walk in. You're like, and that's the physical way that it's set up. We talk a lot about, and even in the book, in the Famous at Home book, if you haven't gotten it, we would encourage you to go pick that up. The Famous at Home book, we talk about in there in the 7 decisions to putting your family center stage, that the atmosphere of your home is everything. And the way that the emotional atmosphere of the home, whether you're grumbling and complaining, or whether, it's a spirit of peace or an atmosphere of peace or joy, patience, you can feel the atmosphere of your home, the emotional and spiritual climate. Even the physical climate really plays a massive factor in that emotional and spiritual climate.
They're so interconnected. I mean, it's just like us. We're such holistic beings, and I think environment matters so much to our spiritual life, our emotional life. You just can't separate them. And I think it's profound when you see the truth of scripture played out in your everyday life, where you're like, that's really so true. You can't separate them, and you feel the difference. And I've had a few people even just say your house, it just feels different. I'm like, thanks. It was hard fought for, I promise.
It really was.
Really, you know what? It was a lot of work. But
I just, one more thing that will bring me a lot of peace and a sigh of is, and those of you listening can't see this, but once we get Christi a mic stand so that you're not having to hold that thing right there. It's just,
I kind of feel like a reporter.
A reporter right now, yeah.
So tell me, Josh, in the last quarter, what were you thinking as you're heading down the field? That's what I feel like. I feel like one of those sideline reporters.
In the last quarter, we would have put in the last half, the reporter would have actually, because it'd be halftime or something, but when you said the last quarter, I was thinking business. I was thinking the last quarter, what were your earnings? I was like,
Do you know that off the top of your head?
Why don't you stick to your day job, baby?
I know.
Guys, listen, Famous at Home podcast, what is upcoming is going to be awesome. We want to introduce that to you. We also want to let you know that the What Do I Do With Anger book has officially released. So please go check that out. You got that right there.
I do.
I have it. We want you to go check that out. What Do I Do With Anger is
so excited for this
our
little
next
guy.
Children's book. Came out after What Am I Feeling and What Do I Do With Worry. we want you to go check that out. And today we're going to talk about anger. We're going to talk about more of our anger. We talked about it last week as well. We're going to talk about it a little bit more today and kind of how we experience that as parents. But then next week, I have a friend on the podcast. I just want to introduce you a little bit to what's upcoming. We are going to do a marriage, parenting, and spiritual growth set of episodes where we're interviewing two people in each one of those categories: marriage, parenting, and spiritual growth. And prior to us introducing you to those interviews, Christi and I will talk about those specific areas, how we're growing in our lives in those areas, the insights that we currently have based on our own relationship and the things that we're learning. And we'll also be taking some stuff again out of the Famous at Home book, I'm sure, because this is what we use to coach families. But I think the big thing, so next week, before we get into that series, next week, I have a friend who I'm interviewing, Matt Redman. Many of you know his songs and his... you worship to a lot of the songs that he wrote. He's a worship pastor. He's a songwriter, but he's a friend and he's the real deal. And we're going to interview him next week. So make sure you check that out. And then we're going to start this series. We're going to start this marriage, parenting, and spiritual growth series. We'll do 3 weeks of each one, so it'll go for 9 weeks. And I can't wait for you guys to hear some of the guests that are upcoming. We've got David Thomas. We've got Scott Sauls. Max Licato, a number of others. So we cannot wait for you guys to check that out. That's going to be what's upcoming. And
now back to anger.
Now back to anger.
The thing that no one wants to talk about. But we all experience, do we not?
We do.
And that's why we wrote a book about it, because if probably anything, that's the one thing that parents struggle with the most. Not just their children's anger, but their anger. And if you're honest, I think all of us as parents almost feel this shame around anger, that we feel badly that our anger comes out sideways on our kids. Well done, Vanna.
Oh, sorry. I'm just...
Do you ever... Vanna?
I brought
Does
the book
Vanna
out
still
for
have
those of listening.
Does Vanna still have her job?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
She's amazing. Yeah.
Wow. But anger is one of those things, like nobody wants to talk about it. It's truly like just so covered in shame, and yet it's just a feeling. And it's something that if we can put tools around for our kids, but also for ourselves, because so often I think we don't even know how to handle that anger in ourselves. So when our children exhibit it, like it just ratchets us up 5 notches, and we wonder why we're struggling so much to help our kids through their anger. And it's because we genuinely aren't sure what to do with our own. And
so today what I want to do is I like practical implication. And so what we'll do is we'll apply some very practical ways. Yeah. I think as we as parents, one of the things we talk about often on this podcast is the idea of becoming, that it's not necessarily the word parenting that we love, but it's the word becoming, because our kids become who we are. Yeah. And so for us as parents, we got to first deal with our own anger. We got to first understand how to manage it ourselves, because that's what emotional intelligence is all about, is first starting with self-awareness. What is my emotional awareness? And am I ratcheting up my own kids? Is my limbic system such that fight, flight, or freeze, that I am the one ratcheting them up? Or am I reacting to their anger in such a way that I'm ratcheting them up even more? Right. And so we want to give some practical ways that we are doing this, what the research shows as well, and then even just kind of pulling out what the book here and what it is that we're doing with kids as you read the book to your kids, and how this book can really be a resource for you, a tool for you to be able to sit with your kids and talk about anger in a healthy way, because it is okay to have anger. You know, even the Bible says it is okay to be angry. Yeah. It says, in your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say don't be angry. It just says don't sin in your anger. And so I think it's important that, and as Christi said, like, we don't want to talk about it, but at the same time too, it is a God-given gift. Yeah. I genuinely believe anger is a gift from God. All of our emotions are a gift for us to learn what is healthy, what is unhealthy, where have we been wronged? Where do we need to set boundaries? You know, it is important for us to be able to look at relationships and be able to enter into, in a deeper way, those relationships in a healthy way. That's what anger does. But when we react in that anger, it only damages the relationship more. And so we just want to have a healthy relationship with anger is really what we want to do, so that you can use it to make the most of your relationships, so that you get the most out of your relationships by entering into the anger.
Well, and I think it starts with a conversation about it, because it's something that we don't talk about very much. So I think what's helpful with the book is that you can start to use that language and that I really think it's a new understanding or a new perspective on what anger is in your home. So it's not like this heavy, dark or misunderstood thing. It's like, oh yeah, so anger, which we talked about last week, but it's a secondary emotion. It means, and I did say this last week, but like if you think about a soccer jersey, which is why we went with the soccer theme, on the front of the jersey is what everyone else sees, right? And so they're the flames. You see the anger, you see the flames, which is so intimidating and destructive. But on the back is the person's name. And that's truly what is real of them. And it's a secondary emotion, and it's usually a tender one. And so, wow, you're doing such a good job.
I'm holding the book up.
On the appropriate page. Well done. Or one of the pages where it talks about it. But I just think that's so helpful. Like, let's like even go to marriage, for example. If you can understand that, like my anger that comes out toward Josh, because it does, like, let's just be real.
It does.
It does. Fact, not fiction. It's signaling something is going on. It signals that a boundary has been crossed somehow. It also can signal like old trauma or a wound that you're trying really hard to protect. You hate that you just felt.
I rarely cross her boundaries, so it's usually an old trauma.
It's usually that you felt like small and vulnerable in some way.
A great example would be as we're getting ready to set this up. I was very mindful because in the past I have done this where, and it's just part of the way that I grew up. We just kind of told each other what to do. So I'd be like, Christi and I are getting this podcast episode ready. Mm-hmm. We're getting all of the lights set up, and I'm saying, in the past I would say to her, I'm standing behind the camera and trying to get the right angle, and I'd say, Christi, sit down, and let me look at this. Sit down. And we just kind of point people to do. But today I was very mindful to go, would you please sit down? Let me take a look at this. Right? Like because when I say sit down, Christi, for her, I'm not trying to be rude, but it comes across as rude, and it triggers stuff in her that she gets angry at me. Mm-hmm. And so that anger, I feel it. Trust me, I do. I feel that atmospheric, emotional response. And so I've been mindful because I've learned living with her for the last 12 years. Now I have learned to say the word please because I think it's appropriate to say the word please. But it's just the tone of voice.
Well, actually, and to ask it as a question as opposed to a command.
Well, that's true too. But listen, here's the guys, hold on a second.
Okay.
Let me just pause this for 1 second. We're not even going to go to an ad. We're going to go to a research study that I just saw that was fascinating. It said that for what people argue over, we'll put this in the show notes, what people argue over is not, like, what is the one thing you think couples argue about the most? Money, sex, in-laws, those types of things. Sure, they're on the list. But the number one argument between couples is attitude and tone of voice. It's the number one thing that couples argue over is attitude and tone of voice.
That makes sense.
So talk about triggering anger.
Yeah.
Just the way that I speak to you or the way that I ask you to do something or tell you to do something triggers anger.
Yeah. And that's a great example. And to then not be so threatened that like that's anger that comes out, right? But to be teachable and curious. If we can just maintain teachability and curiosity. So we're not so offended when someone's anger comes out towards us, nor are we so defensive when someone like might ask us a question. Like I've noticed that like that got you seem pretty angry. Do you know why? Or can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or where's that coming from? Because often we don't know. But if we can just maintain teachability and curiosity, like where does that come from? Why does that make me so mad? Can I tell you one that I still don't truly understand why it makes me so mad?
Tell me.
When I hurt myself, like I stub my toe or like catch something. Okay.
It does make you mad.
like I had headphones in. I've been trying not to use AirPods anymore because of all the EMFs and I'm learning all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, so I have to use the wired ones, which is fine sometimes, unless you're in the kitchen and it catches on the drawer pulls like all the time. And it caught on the drawer pulls yesterday like 3 times. And I was about to throw my phone. Like, I was so mad, and I don't know why that triggers such anger in me. Like, I've truly tried to reflect, like, what is that? I'm like offended and annoyed that it's such an inconvenience. I don't know. That one I truly don't know, but a lot of the other ones I do know. And I think what's healthy though is just trying to be curious about why, and doing the same with those in your family. That anger isn't this huge threatening thing. And you may have grown up in a home where that was true. And that's why anger could be either something you don't allow in your home, or you punish it or dismiss it. You hate it when it comes out of your kids. And just to be curious about that. We've talked about that in episodes prior, where we talked about even with What Am I Feeling, in our first kids book, where it's just a curiosity of like, why is that specific emotion bring up so much in me, and to dig into that a little bit more. But I think the thing with anger specifically is it's so damaging to relationships if we're not careful. I think the great thing is that we can always repair. We can always heal. But if this becomes like a pattern where we're just destroying people with our anger because it's easier, i.e. we don't have to have self-control, then that's something that I think, and that's with our kids. Like, that's why we get so upset when their anger, they lash out and it hurts somebody, or they yell at their sibling or you. It's destroying relationship. Like, it's breaking trust.
And I think that's what's beautiful about the curiosity and teachability piece. And this is what I would encourage each of us to think about. So, going back and just thinking of the practicalities of this, number one, being mindful of, how you're speaking to people, your tone of voice, your attitude, and how you're, maybe triggering angry feelings in those that you love around you, or those that you work with or lead. But number two, also too, the teachability and curiosity is really, really powerful, because what ends up happening is oftentimes if Christi takes her headphone and it yanks yanks off the drawer in the kitchen, or she stubs her toe or something like that, I will be honest with you. What I feel if I'm in her presence is that it was my fault. Like, I feel as if it was my fault that happened. And I know that the kids are feeling the same way. Like, because if I'm feeling it, everyone else is feeling it. And I'm not saying that against you. I'm saying is I think that's for all of us.
I think I'll push back a little bit on that, though. That's probably triggering a part of your story.
And it could very
a
well
wound
be.
in your story, where a parent makes you feel like it was your fault, that their emotional equilibrium, like them being happy, is because you are pleasing to them. And if you disappoint them, that makes them angry.
That is one way. Another way is if you have taken it out on me in the past and you're getting better at it, but it's still triggering within me that you did that. Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And I think, again, this is where curiosity and teachability come in. Number one, that we're teachable and having the conversation of going, wait a minute, did you do that in the past, or do I do that now? And then curiosity of going, wait a minute, is there something in my past that makes it feel like the anger's coming out at me? Or did she actually say, Josh, why'd you stick this here? Why is, this drawer this way? And, maybe I just fixed the drawer, right? Now all of a sudden she's complaining about the drawer. I just fixed it.
It's totally
and of course
your
it's
fault.
going to now be my fault.
It's totally your fault.
But we have to pay attention to that, because I think what ends up happening is when our kids get angry, or they take their anger out on us, or our spouse takes their anger out on us, we personalize it. If you have something in your own story where you're personalizing it, what ends up happening is you end up getting defensive, you end up passive aggressive, you end up, there's a number of different ways that you dance in relationships that we talk about in the Famous at Home book, which we'd love for you to pick up as well. But we dance, and then we get into our dance. One withdraws, one gets aggressive. Like, it's just back and forth.
And I will say, like when I was on the bottom rung of life, when we had 2 little babies and I was not doing well, but what I didn't know at the time is I was literally living in fight, flight, or freeze. Like I was in survival mode. And so anything that threatened me, I got angry because I was protecting myself. It's just, and that is to give grace to, like, if you are in that season, new moms, sleep exhaustion, you are, I won't even want to talk to like people who are struggling with anxiety. Like all of those things are triggering that amygdala. So if you're
even post-traumatic, PTSD. I mean,
if you've dealt with any type of trauma, when you're triggered and you go into that survival, like your nervous system is doing everything it can to protect you. It doesn't actually care about relationships. So it is trying to protect you and you alone. And so when that anger comes out, it's a way to protect that, this, like, to stop this from happening, protect you that it wouldn't happen again. But when you start to see this cycle happening again and again, and back in that season, like, you couldn't have talked to me about it without me getting defensive, because I was in self-protective mode. And maybe you're there, maybe maybe your spouse is there, maybe you can just totally relate to friends or family members that are there. And I think that's really important to have the grace to understand, like, that's where they're at right now, and not to excuse like cyclical bad behavior, but that explains a lot of why they are struggling so much to control their reactions, because they're just reacting, it's not responding. But because when you are functioning in that type of part of the brain, you can't respond. You are literally in the caveman part of the brain where it's reacting for you. And so that's why we talk about all the ways to get yourself back into this prefrontal cortex where you can problem solve, where you can think and, relate to another person, you can connect. And I just want to say, for all of those people who feel that, like, I lived that season, it felt like, for so long. And I think, and even though, like, the women, like, we go through Leader's Heart with, I think all of us, every single one of us, relate to that and have either live in it or come in and out of it, or have had seasons where we've lived in that. And it's so difficult because you're trying everything you can and then you beat yourself up because you're like, oh, I did it again. But it's your nervous system that's been trying to protect you for so long. And so just to have the curiosity to go, why is that happening? Where is that coming from? And why does my body feel so unsafe? Because that's why it's triggering. It's trying to get you back to safety.
And I'll say this too. I think it's important to say, when you're in that season, it is, going to counseling might feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have the time. I don't have the money.
Yeah.
Right now we're living post-pandemic where it's kind of like the waiting lists are forever and a day long. It's like, I can't even find somebody to get into. There are websites out there. There are places that you can go, and we can put a few in the show notes if you're interested in finding a counselor. And we highly are huge on therapy, but it might not be a season where you're just like, I just don't have the bandwidth for that. And I don't have the time or the energy right now to go deep, to go look into my past, to go do that. I just want to coach you on something real briefly. Our very first decision that we help and coach couples and families to do, to put their family center stage, it starts with self-awareness. And we talk about it I know I keep going back from famous at home to what do I do with anger, but the first decision is to change your mindset. And a lot of times the single way to change your mindset is to get outside and simply go for a walk for 5 minutes and just put your feet in the grass. Because what changing your mindset is it's all about finding the one way that you can show up as the best version of you. Yeah. And that just takes one small decision. And I remember when you were on the bottom rung of life, and for me, I mean, I'm in those traumatic years. Like, I still have post-traumatic stress. I still have a stress reaction to hearing our 2-year-old cry in the middle of the night and scream in the middle of the night if he needs.
Real.
Like, something happens in my body that I probably need to go talk about and work through.
Little EMDR.
Something happens in my body that it's just
It's trauma.
It's trauma. And so the thing that I would just encourage you to do is find the one step that you can take to show up as the best version of you today. What is one new rhythm you can implement in your life that will help you start to respond rather than to react in your anger or when somebody else angers you?
Yeah.
And again, I don't know what that looks like for you. Again, it can simply be going for a walk in the middle of the day. It can be starting, to exercise, to do a workout. And you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do a 30-minute workout? Do a 5-minute workout. You don't start small, start with baby steps. What is it going to be that will help you just respond differently?
Yeah. I'm going to share a story of one of our just amazing Leaders Heart women. And she'd gone through, we're almost done this year and we're going to start enrolling for next year. But just her what she's taken from it and how much it's just incredible. But she just had a baby. And it's number 5, right? So it's not like she's new to this. This is the 5th time round. And we were coaching through just how difficult it is in those early weeks where you're not sleeping. And she has so much on her plate and just the physical exhaustion is just overwhelming. And so we went back to the basics and I was like, what's the one decision? What's the one thing that you can do to show up as the best version of you? And she's a runner. And she had been cleared. She did got 6-week clearance. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to start doing that. It felt selfish. And I think we all struggle with that, where it was leaving her 5 kids, for someone to even watch, even when she had help, it's they can't take all 5 of them, 4 plus a newborn. And yet she was like, I'm going to do it. And so she went, and I just talked with her again, a month later, and we checked in, and she's like, she was different. She was her whole countenance was different. She was like, Christi, I've listened to your podcast forever. I'm in Leader's Heart. And she's like, I've heard you say this. I've heard, in Famous at Home. She was like, I don't know why it just didn't click. I just didn't do it. But it has changed everything. And when she saw that self-care, which I really don't love that word, because I think we think it's massages and, getting our nails done. But she's literally caring for myself is my best way to worship God. I am worshiping him by caring for the fullness of who he created. It changed everything for her. So she didn't feel shame or guilt. And it changed their family, their marriage, her outlook, her mental health, everything, by just making that one decision. And I'm just so proud of her. And I hope she doesn't mind me sharing such a personal, it's just, I think all of us women can relate to that. I think men can relate to it too. We put ourselves last and wonder why it's not working by just pouring out more toward others, because we're not caring for the person that God created, the only person that we truly can fully steward, which is ourselves. And to see, it's just it brings me such joy. It's just, you watch it in other people when it clicks, and it's just the spark that just transforms. And to go back to anger, that's one of the things that was such a struggle for her, because she was so, as you could imagine, frazzled. And she also works full time. So the realities of that are completely, if you look at it, we use this a lot, you make sense. Of course you make sense. Of course you'd be angry, trying to control all those things at all times when you have not yourself, you're just not functioning fully yourself. And so, that's a great tie-in, and it's not,
it's so good. And
it's the way we're made.
Well, and I think too, one of the most humbling and I think sanctifying verses in the Bible is, and we use it in What Do I Do with Anger, is James 1:19. And it says, be quick to listen. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And a lot of times we miss verse 20. It's James 1:19, and we stop there. But you may not realize, verse 20 actually says, because human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. When we react in our human anger, we are not acting rightly before God. And because we're hurting other people and we're hurting ourselves. And I think, as Christi said in the beginning of the podcast, it's damaging to relationships. That's why it's damaging to relationships. And so when we listen to that verse, be quick to listen. A lot of times we use it to go, okay, I want to be quick to listen to my spouse. I want to be quick to listen to my kids. And yes, that is important. Those are the things we want to do. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. But I genuinely believe that we need to apply that to our own lives and our relationship with God. So when you're sitting with God, listening should be the first thing we're doing, not speaking. Like our prayer time, what is it to sit and just listen? And it's significant here because one of the physiological ways to reduce anger, and we talk about this in the book, and by the way, in the end of What Do I Do with Anger, there's a parent resource. And it's called What Can You Do with Anger? And it's a parent resource in the back on how to coach your kids, but also for you to also think about this. One of the most significant ways physiologically that we can deal with anger is deep breathing. Deep breathing has a remarkable, it's not just anger, it's with any emotion, and it's also physiologically healthy for you, just like eating well and exercising. Breathing in through your nose, holding, and then slowly breathing out through your mouth. And not breathing into your chest, but breathing into your gut, like where your gut is filling up, and just imagining.
You realize how rarely you do that.
Filling your gut up, and then you're releasing it out with your mouth. We rarely breathe like that. I think it's because in the Western world, we are so quick paced that we breathe into our chest, and it's not healthy for us. We need to be breathing into our gut. And so I think there's a deep spiritual practice of being able to just sit, and maybe this is your one thing you need to do to start responding rather than reacting, is to just sit with the Lord. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and do it a few times. Count 4 breaths in, count to 4 coming in, or count to 5, and then count to 6, 7, or 8 breathing out, like slowly breathing out.
And isn't that it's the longer the exhale is what triggers the parasympathetic nervous system to actually calm you down, which is what brings you out of fight or flight.
And when you're doing that, simply ask God to say, Lord, what is it? Like when did you recently have an episode of being angry? What
Last night.
was it that made you angry? Right? And in the book we have, when did I get angry?
Headphones.
Who or what made me angry? What did I do with it? And then asking God, what other feeling was behind it? And what was he doing in the middle of it? Like what is he, where was he in the middle of that anger? Where was he in that moment? And asking him, Lord, show me where you were at in that moment. Because this isn't just about our relationships with other people. This is about a relationship with him. Were you angry with him? And let him speak to you in that. But so often we get so busy that we just miss doing that. And I want to encourage you, maybe that one step to showing up as a better version of you is sitting with him for just 5 minutes and just taking deep breaths and asking him, when was I angry? Where were you in that? And Lord, what are you teaching me in the middle of it? Because I believe that is where, as the Bible says, we love because he first loved us, where you will be filled with his love. And it is out of that you go forth and you start to be teachable and curious so that you can enter in and listen to where other people are at, to be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry with other people, because you have first sat and were quick to listen and slow to speak with God.
And that, I think that's part of it too, what you just said. If you can actually discern to listen to even how you respond to what God says about your anger, Because so often we have a response. Is it condemnation? Is it shame? We talked about that before. And that's the way we respond to other people's anger. But the reason we respond to their anger that way is because that's the way we respond to our own. We're either we're angry with ourselves for having it. We condemn ourselves. We're ashamed. And maybe God's just like, I see it. I see, and that makes sense. I see why you're angry. That makes sense to me. Or maybe he is giving you a word of correction. But I'd be so curious if we all did that, how different the Father's response to our anger is than what our response to our anger is. Like his compassion is so deep, and our criticism of ourselves is so strong, and they don't go together. It's so contrary, I think, to his character.
Guys, he is so loving. He is his arms are wide open. And he doesn't, his kindness is so good. I mean, he doesn't want us to react in our anger because it hurts relationships, but he does want to teach us something through it. He wants to show us something through it. And I think that is so often where we miss it, is we don't sit and listen long enough to know what it is he's trying to show us in the middle of it. And I think that's a great way to get started with that. Which leads me to a whole other piece. So I think moving on, I do want to say this because this is the phrase in the book: anger can show you what's deep in your heart, and naming that feeling can bring a fresh start. And so listen, be quick to listen to what is going on deeper in your heart. What did make you angry? Was it that, someone hurt you? Was it that you were hurt? Was it that you're sad? Was it that you're grieving, right? Like, what is it behind that? Was you jealous or embarrassed, right? And being able to identify that and write that down, because that takes you into a deeper understanding of how you can better connect with yourself, with God, and with other people. Which leads me to my next conversation that I want to have.
And I just say, and that's where you're truly are. Like, that's what is truly
you. That's the true you, because everything else will create an imposter. If you are living out of your anger, you're gonna show up to protect yourself and feel safe in relationships, and you're gonna live out of an imposter rather than living out of your true self.
And you may know people. It may be you. It may be people where they have formed an entire identity, or talk about an imposter, which is like a false version of ourselves, like a role that they play around anger. Like they're just this fly off the handle type of person, but it's like it's become their personality, and it's not real. It's not true to who they really are. There's something behind that that's probably and usually is so tender and so soft. And yet, if you aren't quick to listen to it, you never get behind it to know what that is.
Well, and so often I think that it's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about, because as we talk about our own anger as adults, as we try to really coach our kids in how to deal with their anger, I think one of the most important things we need to talk about is when we are living out of that imposter, when we are using our anger to protect ourselves and to stay safe, there comes a point at which that no longer serves us well, and which leads to, I'm tossing you a softball here, Christi, to forgiveness and the power of forgiveness, because even in that, there are emotions that we need to identify that have prevented us from forgiving.
Yeah. Well, and like anger is one emotion, but we talk about like there's an intensity of core emotions. If you think about bitterness, if you think about holding on to resentment, that's all a form of anger.
Those are stronger forms of anger. And then frustration would be on the lower end of that when you talk about the intensity.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. My Kids EQ coming soon. Your kids will learn that too. And there's a reason why it's so powerful to know that, because we throw those terms out, but what we're really we're all saying is anger. Like that's what that is. But like, I'm bitter, I'm resentful. We don't actually often say that. That's harbored so deep within us. And recently I went through something where I realized I was holding on to resentment from like way back. But I realized it was still affecting me, and it was something that I had to forgive. And so one of Josh's spiritual mentors, we told him, would you just pray for us? Like, Christy's like just wanting to forgive. And I understand forgiveness. It's not like I haven't walked through forgiveness before. But this was so different. And he gave us this model of forgiveness where it was a prayer, but then it was also naming all of the feelings. So the hurt feelings that you felt from another person, whether that was, and I can't remember a lot of them now, like there were so many that you don't realize other people have caused you to feel insignificant, unsafe, unseen, like things that you're like, yeah. And that's why I got angry. Like you're angry because something was hurt in you, whether they meant to or not. It affected you and it hurt you. And so we hold on to this anger or resentment or bitterness thinking, and really what that is waiting for them to repay a debt. So it's like we're holding out this debt waiting for them to repay it when that's never going to happen. Like even Josh, like he could hurt me and not mean to, right? And I could hold that debt. Like he can't repay. He can't go back and make me not feel that hurt. Actually, even if he wanted to. So we're waiting for a debt to be repaid that never will. And instead, it's releasing all of those hurt feelings back to God and the debt of them and then asking for forgiveness for our own bitterness that we've held on to this resentment, bitterness, anger. And it was one of the most profound things that I have walked through where I felt a visceral change in my body. You pray that, you release it, and then you ask the Lord to, like, even saying that, it's like take that debt, and then you pray a prayer of blessing over those people. And it was so powerful. There was, I remember that month, like a bunch of the women in Leaders Heart, you know, we have our monthly like coaching calls, and I got on, and it was like a theme. Like all of us were struggling with resentment, unforgiveness. And I don't even know that we would say it was unforgiveness because it just becomes so under the surface, like low lying resentment but it's anger. And a lot of us walked through, I sent them all this model of forgiveness, and it was like my whole body relaxed, like something in me, it just dropped. And I realized there was this tension that I was holding on to for so long because anger is protective. Like you're trying to protect yourself and you're braced. And that's really what holding on to it causes in your physical body. And I think we wonder why we feel on edge and anxious and like we're going to snap. I think it's because we're holding on to unforgiveness and anger. And so it was a super profound thing for me personally. Like I felt my whole body relax, and it has stayed that way. Like it's not that I've not gotten angry, but Josh and I were like, we need to make this a regular practice where we walk through forgiveness. Yeah. Like, cause you just realize you just harbor little things, like little things. Maybe you use the word annoyed. I was annoyed when, but that's a lower level of anger. And if we continue to hold on to that, I think our physical, mental, emotional selves are what suffer.
And also too, if this is something, because I just thought of this, you're talking about this model, and it's like, okay, people are going to be like, oh, I want to do that model. What is that model? My spiritual mentor, Dr. Gary Oliver, is the one who sent that to us. What we'll do, if you want us to walk you through that, or you're more interested in that, put it in the comment section of YouTube. Let us know, like, hey, we want you to. So
or send section. An email too if you're listening.
If you're listening, yeah, go to YouTube and put it in the comment section, or send us an email. But we'd love, because I think what we can do is we can either do a podcast episode on it, or we're venturing into maybe doing some live streaming. So maybe we could do a live stream on it or something like that. But anyway, just throwing it out there. Let us know if you'd be interested.
Or you could apply for Leaders Heart. And then we can actually go through it together, which is really cool.
Which you also hear about next week on next week's episode with Matt Redman.
I love Leaders Heart. Like I love it because it's all of these things in one, and you deal with the real stuff. And I realized it is just such a joy. Oh, such a joy.
It really is. So guys, listen, if you are watching online, you can see the links down below. If you're listening, show notes. Go get What Do I Do with Anger for you and your kids. I was going to say for your kids, but I'm like, yeah, get it for you too, because we know
It's
that
mostly
we have some
for us,
issues
isn't
with
it?
Get What Do I Do with Anger, and then also
And there's
too,
no shame with that. Can I just
no, it's a gift. Like,
how
anger
many
is a
times can we
gift
make that
from
super clear?
God,
Yeah.
for us, and I think.
But women
Any emotion
especially,
is-
I don't even know if we talked about this last episode, but women especially have been taught that anger is not appropriate. So from little girls on, for men, that is, and for little boys, they're taught that anger is good. Be tough, be strong, man up. Those whereas for sadness and fear for boys is the sort of shamed emotion, but it's anger for girls. And I sure felt that as a child and still as an adult. And I know most of the women in my life that I know would say the same thing. There is a lot of shame around anger. And it also makes you feel out of control, which is I think why women especially, we try so hard to control it, which is therefore why it comes out sideways. Because any emotion that we try to control and not manage will come out sideways.
Go get What Do I Do with Anger. We'd love for you to go pick that up. And then also the Famous at Home book takes you deeper into how to put your family center stage in a world competing for your time, attention, and identity. That's the way that we coach families. And it's kind of the step-by-step process that we use to coach families. Now it's in book form for you to be able to walk through. It is kind of that it is that very thing. It is a way for you to walk through how to put your family center stage, set your family values, set your family mission, really enter into the emotional place, the emotional heart of your spouse and your kids, and enter into their inner world. And that's what it's all about. I was going to go into a little bit more with that, but I think I'll save it. To this whole anger thing really has the conversation for me going to the place of 15 minutes a day. We'll probably talk about that again coming up here on another episode as we talk about the marriage, as we introduce the marriage segment here in a number of weeks.
And I'm doing this on, it's being recorded, but do you think I'm doing a better job managing my anger?
Oh, wow. This is live, y'all. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
Are you doing a better job at managing your anger? I would say yes. You're doing a way better job at managing your anger than you have in the past.
Really?
Oh, 100%. And I do believe that forgiveness thing I have seen a distinct difference since that forgiveness exercise.
Okay. And am I less defensive if you bring it up?
If I bring what
like anger, like if you're like, whoa, like Christi, do you feel like I'm less defensive?
I feel the atmosphere different.
I feel less defensive.
Like that, and I feel like the atmosphere is different.
Okay.
I 100% feel like the atmosphere is different. Yeah. And,
See,
and we talked
sometimes
about this last time too. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, sometimes you just need to know, like you need the people in your life that love you a lot to actually tell you, like, I've noticed a change, like really good job.
That's so true.
Because you need to be proud of yourself
and
that you're progressing, and it's not just this never ending battle that you feel like you can't win. You need the, like, I really am doing a better job. I'm never going to be perfect. Never. I'm always like, anger is not going to go away. It's an emotion. It's a gift. It's a good thing, but I'm going to get better at managing it. And I've seen evidence that I'm doing that. And that's the hope.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to be just sure that
I'm
that's
glad you
true.
asked the question. I think it's important though to also say that it's easy for us to take each other for granted. And I know you're doing a better job, and I feel the atmosphere different, but I don't voice it. And I think there's a couple different reasons I don't voice it. Number one, I just tend to take you for granted, and I think that you already know that you're doing a better job, or that you already know.
But I really need a gold star.
But you really need a gold star. So
that's why there's a lot of gold stars on the cover of this book, by the way, because
Famous at Home.
Famous at Home. I really think you need them. Like, I think we all do. We're still like little kids who want like another gold star on our like responsibility chart or our like chore chart, because we need to know that we're doing a good job.
Well, and I also would say this too. The other reason it might be sometimes that I might not say it, that you're doing a better job, is because it'd be for me to bring it up to go, oh, you're doing a better job with your anger. It's like, or
will that make me?
Will that make you like, what do you mean I'm doing a better job? You mean I was angry before?
Yeah.
Like, so for me to be able to know, and I think that's important, that if you are working on it, that you give permission to your spouse to say, it's okay. Like, tell me if I'm doing better. That
Teachability and curiosity. Yeah.
Overreacting to my kids. I'm not overreacting to you. Tell me when you see me doing a better job. It's not going to make me angry. I want you to notice it. Like, give your spouse permission to speak those words into your life. Because I would say that I wouldn't have spoken those words into your life because I'm not sure. Like, should I?
Or even that would be like insulting.
Right.
I'm guessing.
Yeah. Am I condescending? Yeah. Speaking condescending to.
No.
It's like, when we try to help, other parents parent their kids. Oh, good job. Way to discipline. Yeah. It's like kind of like.
Yeah, we would never do that.
We would never do that. But I'm just saying, like, but that happens, right?
Yeah.
Usually from people who don't have kids, but.
Or from like your parents that are like,
From your parents,
good job,
right,
mom.
yeah.
But I actually love it when my mom says like that, like, good job, mommy. You did a great job there.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
But your mom's genuine about it.
yeah.
She's not like trying to.
But see, gold star. I needed it.
You needed your gold star.
And go, like, you need your gold stars. Like, that's, yes, go for it. Like, and have that conversation with your spouse. Like, I need you to tell me when I'm doing a great job at XYZ, especially the things that are really on your heart right now.
Go get What Do I Do with Anger? Go get Famous at Home. We put them in the show notes. And until next week, keep in mind that the greatest red carpet you will walk is through your front door.
Keep being famous at home. We love you.